Hey guys, and welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday. And before we get into this case, I just want to do the usual. So my name's Amber, I upload beauty and true crime content. If you're the type of videos that you like to watch, then why not hit that subscribe button and come along and join our little family. And if you're already part of the family, then make sure that notification bell switched on just so you're notified of whenever I upload a video. And just a little warning before we get into today's video, that these videos do contain adult content and adult references. If that makes you feel uncomfortable in any sort of way, then that is fine. You can click off this video and there will be plenty of others available to watch on my channel. But now we can get into today's case, and today we are going to be doing another British serial killer case, and we are going to be covering the Anthony Hardy case, and he was known as the Camden Ripper. So Anthony John Hardy was born on the 31st of May in 1951, born in Burton upon Trent in Staffordshire. Anthony had a pretty uneventful childhood and he excelled in school and college. He earned an engineer's degree from the Imperial College of London and subsequently became a manager of a large company. In the mid 1970s, Anthony actually met and married a lady called Judith Dwight, with whom he had attended university with. The couple decided to move to Tasmania in Australia, and that is where they raised their 4 children. It has been reported that from as early as 1982, Anthony did start to show signs of mental illness, and in 1982 Anthony did try to kill his wife Judith. He bludgeoned her over the head with a water bottle before trying to drown her in the bath. Luckily, she did survive the incident. No charges were filed against him, and he checked himself into a psychiatric clinic in Queensland following the incident. He remained there for several weeks before returning back to Britain. The couple filed for divorce in 1986, and Judith maintained custody of the children, and like Anthony, she also moved back to the UK, and this is where she started a new life. Anthony began to stalk Judith, and it actually resulted in her having to file for a restraining order against him. He did break the restraining order restrictions, and he was actually temporarily imprisoned because of this. After the divorce, Anthony spent a lot of time in mental hospitals, and he was subsequently diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He was also treated in psychiatric hospitals across London for depression, drug-induced psychosis and alcohol abuse. Anthony was homeless, so he lived in various hostels across London, and he picked up convictions for theft and being drunk and disorderly. He began abusing drugs and alcohol, which further exaggerated these symptoms. He got into trouble with the law on more than several occasions for aggressive behaviour and for theft, for which he did serve a short stint in jail, and he became an alcoholic and a diabetic. He was arrested in 1998 when a prostitute accused him of raping her, but the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. It has been reported that he was also investigated for 3 further rapes, but again there was lack of evidence to convict. He was ordered to seek psychiatric counselling, which he took advantage of at the local hospital. He was eventually discharged and referred to outpatient care. In 2000, Anthony moved into a 1-bedroom public housing flat on the Royal College Street in Camden. His new residence was located a short distance from King's Cross, and it was an area where prostitutes were known to frequent. It is believed that he did actually choose this location deliberately for that reason, and because he thought the neighbourhood would be a good hunting ground for him. In January 2002, Anthony actually caught the attention of the police again when he was caught pouring battery acid into a neighbour's letterbox. At the same time, the concerned neighbour told the police that they believed that there was something amiss with Anthony's flat, and this tip actually led the police to a gruesome discovery. When the police arrived at Anthony's residence, they found the bedroom door was locked. When they eventually managed to get into the bedroom, they found the corpse of a young woman who was lying naked on the bed. She had cuts to her head, bite marks and bruising, indicating that foul play may have been involved. Forensic pathologist Freddie Patel subsequently concluded that the woman had actually died of a heart attack, in spite of the circumstances looking suspicious. Freddie did later come under scrutiny for his findings in this case, along with other findings in other cases, and it actually resulted in his suspension from the government department's register of pathologist pending an inquiry, and in 2012 his name was erased from the medical register by the General Medical Council, meaning that he can no longer practice medicine in the United Kingdom. The woman found in Anthony's flat was later identified as Sally Rose White. She was a 38-year-old who was a known prostitute in the King's Cross area. She was known to have an addiction to crack cocaine, and Sally had suffered from brain damage and behavioural problems caused by a birth-related spinal injury. It was believed that her condition had worsened with age and due to lack of treatment, coupled with her addiction to drugs, which resulted in a heart attack. However, her death from natural causes would later come into question when there was remains of other women discovered in Anthony's flat. On December 30th of 2002, a homeless man who was foraging for food in bins came across a horrific discovery. In one of the bags he found human remains, included severed sections of 2 legs. The homeless man took the remains to a nearby hospital where the police were then alerted. The police arrived at the crime scene and they immediately cordoned off the area around the bins, which was located behind a pub on Royal College Street. Officers searched the bins and found approximately 8 more bags which contained various body parts. The torso of a young woman was also found in a wheelie bin about 100 yards from the original discovery. The body parts were taken to St Pancras mortuary to be examined by pathologists. The cause of death was difficult to establish due to the heads and the hands of the victims still being missing. Yet pathologists were able to determine that the remains were of 2 different women who were likely murdered sometime over Christmas. DNA tests were conducted in the hopes that it would help the investigators uncover the identities of the women. A trail of blood was said to have led police to Anthony's flat, which was located a short distance from where the bodies were discovered. The police promptly obtained a warrant and searched his ground floor apartment, where they found incriminating evidence. At the time of the search, Anthony was nowhere to be found. In Anthony's flat, investigators discovered a hacksaw which had human skin still attached to the blade. An electric jigsaw power tool was found, so were pornographic magazines which were just scattered around. A woman's black stiletto shoe was rested on the windowsill. Blood was found in the bathroom and a devil's mask lay alongside a note on a table reading Sally White RIP, which was the original woman that the police had discovered in the flat months previous. One of the most incriminating pieces of evidence found at the apartment was a woman's torso wrapped in bin liners. Following the gruesome discovery, a massive search was launched to find Anthony, who had gone missing for several days. It was suspected that he had fled town. However, there was a CCTV video surveillance camera that caught him on tape on January 1st trying to fill his prescription for his diabetic medication at a London hospital. Anthony had also apparently shaved his beard in an attempt to alter his appearance. During an interview with hospital staff, officers learnt that Anthony had spent approximately 4 hours waiting for his medication. It was speculated that he'd been drunk because he smelled heavily of alcohol. Anthony became panicky and he left the hospital without receiving any medication after the staff tried to convince him to go to a hostel. Anthony had been seen by a member of the public with a woman called Kelly Ann Nicol, who was aged 24, and this was shortly after Christmas. And the family members were very concerned for her safety because she sort of went off the radar for a little bit, but luckily Kelly actually fortunately contacted her families to let her parents know that she was okay. Anthony had repeatedly tried to persuade her to go back to his apartment and she did not allow herself to be influenced by him. It was a move that actually saved her life because she could have been another one of his victims. On January 2nd, Anthony had gone on the run and he was actually spotted by an off-duty policeman when he had gone to the Great Ormond Street Hospital to collect his prescription of insulin. During a search of the hospital grounds, he was found hiding behind the bins. A fight actually took place when he was trying to resist arrest, and it actually caused one of the police officers to be knocked unconscious, and another officer was actually stabbed through the hand and had his eye dislocated from its socket. Wow, that's a grisly scene. Despite suffering these injuries, the wounded police officer held Anthony until backup arrived and he was arrested at the scene. Under arrest, he simply replied no comment to every question that the police asked him. Not long after Anthony was apprehended, investigators were able to obtain the identification of the 2 victims, whose remains were discovered at his home and in the trash bins. The victims were identified as Elizabeth Selina Valad, who was 29, and Bridget McAlin, who was 34. The two women were found to actually have a lot in common. Elizabeth was a rebellious woman who was known to have lived a wayward life from as early as her teens. She was born in Nottingham originally in 1972, and she was the only child of a Professor Hassan Valad and his British wife Jackie. The couple lived a short while in America, but they broke up when Jackie decided that she wanted to return to England with Elizabeth to live in Nottingham. At this time, Elizabeth was around 1 year old. Jackie was quoted as saying that her daughter was a very difficult child who mixed with the wrong people as a teenager. She further stated that Elizabeth did drop out of school and moved to London by herself at the age of 16. From that point, the two had very little contact. At the age of 18, Elizabeth did begin a relationship with a man for whom she lived with in London. Shortly into the relationship, Elizabeth actually became pregnant and later gave birth to a little girl. The three lived with one another for a brief period before Elizabeth left her newly formed family in search of a different lifestyle. Elizabeth worked in a massage parlour where she actually got involved in a relationship with a married millionaire who set her up with an expensive apartment and provided her with luxury gifts. After some time, she moved out and she started to date other people. She then went down the route of unfortunately beginning to take crack cocaine, and she went back to prostitution to fund her lifestyle. Her addiction eventually led to her death because Anthony played upon his victims and vulnerabilities by luring them back to his apartment with the promise of money or drugs. It was Elizabeth's torso that was actually found in Anthony's apartment, and her legs that were discovered by the homeless man who'd found the bags in the bin. It was difficult for investigators to identify her initially because her hands and head were never found. However, they were able to obtain a positive ID on her by processing the serial number found on her breast implants. Bridget McLannan's identity was revealed on January 6th during a brief hearing at the Heddon Court. Bridget, whose torso and other parts were found in the bins, was identified through DNA, and like Elizabeth, her head and hands were never found. She was actually a native New Zealander, and she was a mother of 2 boys, and she worked in Camden as a prostitute. She earned her money by selling her body, and it was also used to finance her addiction to crack. Anthony was believed to have been one of her customers, which is how she ended up at the flat. The murders of Elizabeth and Bridget actually led to the re-investigation into the Sally White's case, and it was believed that Anthony might have actually murdered her and simply got away with it. They believed that the pathologist had incorrectly diagnosed her cause of death as a heart attack. They just had to prove their theory. However, after a brief inquest, it was determined that Sally had indeed died of natural causes related to her chronic heart disease. Findings, however, would later be disproved following surprising new evidence brought forth by Anthony himself. Anthony's murder trial began at the Old Bailey Courthouse in November of 2003, and during the onset of the trial, he actually made a startling confession. He not only pled guilty to the murders of Elizabeth and Bridget, but also to that of Sally White. He had previously denied murdering the women. The confession discounted the conclusions of the previous pathological report into Sally's death and threw into question the credibility of the medical examiners that worked on her case. During the trial, it was revealed how each woman succumbed to their gruesome demise. Anthony was said to have lured all of the women to his apartment with the offer of money. He then engaged in extreme sex with the women before strangling them. He was described as being a pornography-obsessed necrophiliac who achieved sexual gratification by posing the nude bodies after death and taking photos, explicit photos of their naked corpses. In fact, it has actually been suggested that the primary motivation of him committing the murders was so he could photograph his victims. It's also suggested that at the time police found Sally White, Anthony was actually likely preparing her body for photos to be taken. She too would have likely ended up in the bins if it had not been for the police interrupting his gruesome activities. Anthony had taken around 44 pornographic pictures of Elizabeth and Bridget, which he allegedly sent to a friend. The pictures were actually later turned into the police, and they claimed that one of the macabre photographs depicted Elizabeth lying posted on the bed with her facial features obscured by a devil mask and a baseball hat, both of which were found at the flat during the search. After Anthony had finished with his victims, he used a hacksaw to dismember their bodies in his bathtub. Evidence of the victims' blood was found in the bathroom, and police interviewed neighbours after the discovery of the bodies, and they claimed to have heard drilling sounds at all hours of the day. On November 25th of 2003, Anthony was given 3 life sentences for for the murders of the 3 women. In May 2010, a High Court judge decided that Anthony should never be released from prison, placing him on the list of whole life tariff prisoners. Mr. Justice Keith, sitting in London, said, "This is one of those exceptionally rare cases in which life should mean life." It has been reported that police believe Anthony is actually possibly connected to the unsolved case of 2 other prostitutes who were found dismembered and dumped in the River Thames, and up to 5 or 6 other murders that bore marked similarities to the ones of which he was convicted, but there was not enough evidence available to directly implicate him. On the 26th of November of 2020, Anthony died of sepsis and complications relating to COVID-19. And this is one time where COVID actually done some good in the world, I think. That's a really awful thing to say, but he was a really awful man. Calm as a bitch, that's all I'm going to say. Yeah, this case is absolutely awful. I'm actually really glad that he was caught when he did, because for me, I always think these people show no signs of slowing down when they're that intense, and I think if he hadn't have been caught, he probably would have killed a lot more women. So I'm just happy that he was caught when he was. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I shall see you in the next case. Thank you so much for watching.